Hi, welcome to those who are new to the Biology is Live webinar series, and to those who have joined us previously, welcome back. I am Sarshini and I'm a graduate from University of Malaya, and I will be your host for today's session. This webinar is supported by the Petri Dish, Malaysian Biotechnology Information Center, GIST, Biomed KL, The Other School, and Sure.co. The speaker will speak on the topic of interest for roughly around 20 minutes. Then we will move on to question and answer for the remaining 20 minutes. Dear viewers, do fill in the attendance form for the e-certificates in the link provided in the comment section. The audience is also reminded to post your questions in the comment section anytime during this session. All right, now enough of that. Allow me to introduce our speaker for this session, Mr. Giva Kuppusamy, the founder of GK Aqua Sedian Berhad. He will be talking about the genetics, breeding, nutrition, and farming in freshwater aquaculture. I will now allow Mr. Giva to further introduce himself and dive right into the topic for today. Over to you, Mr. Giva.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks, our dear MC, Ms. Suharshini. First of all, I would like to say thanks to the MYBIOSA for inviting me to share the topics on freshwater aquaculture. And rather than more into specialized topics, I think what I will do is today I will just talk you through our own journey and experience in the field of aquaculture. So yeah, so with that, I think without further ado, I will share my screen to start the presentation. Is that okay? All right, so the topic for today is bridging biotechnology and aquaculture. So everybody will be wondering what aquaculture can do in, what biotechnology can do in the field of aquaculture. So as I said, I'll share more the personal journey and experience. So firstly, okay, so we have to admit that with growing population, with the growing population, the global food security at risk, especially with climate change. So with climate change, we are facing more of a crop fading. As you know, the whole world being fed by 4 major crops, and that's soybean, soy, maize, rice, and wheat. And going forward with less land for agriculture, I think we have to be more smart in farming food. So if we dive into aquaculture, that's a very efficient food conversion efficiency. So if you see, for instance, like cattle requires about 8.5 kilo of grass or grains to convert to 1 kilo of meat. But whereas in aquaculture, in shrimp especially, it requires about 1.6 of the feed to convert to a shrimp. So that made my initial interest why we particularly work on shrimps or prawns. And our tagline for the company: everybody should be able to enjoy giant prawn, or better known as udang galah in Malaysia. The reason being because the demand is very high, but the supply is low and the price is very high in Malaysia. So just a little intro on GK Aqua. We founded the company in 2016. And 2017, we got a Bionexus status. And following year in 2018, we got a funding from Platform Ventures to do genetics and breeding of udang galah. And this year, we got a 2 million ringgit grant from Cradle to commercialize our business. So that where we started 4 years ago. It's pretty much a pilot hatchery in Lenggeng, which comprises of the breeding capabilities for breeding and hatchery. And now this is where we are today in 6 acres of facility, producing, aiming to produce up to 20 million post-larvae per year. So, so if you look into prawn industry, the value chain, we are in the upstream, where at broodstock development and multiplication. So what we do technically is to collect all the broodstocks and do genetic selection, genetic improvement, and that improves the farming efficiency. So that's where a lot of biotechnology methodologies involved in terms of perfecting the value chain, right? So the core business of GK is actually to develop technologies, and we work with partners, universities and private sectors And then we work in downstream with other joint venture companies to look into the marketing aspect of it, the farming, and etc. So, okay, so if I take you back, why udang galah, or better known as Malaysian giant river prawn? As you can see in the graph, for last 13 years, we were only merely producing about 300 metric ton, where the local demand for udang galah is about 3,000 metric ton. And why the industry couldn't cope with the production is mainly because the farmers still reliance on the broodstocks from the wild. And I'm sure many of you heard about domestication of broodstocks. That's where involved in making animal domesticated in captive, so they can produce consistently. But in this case, they're still taking the broodstocks from the wild. So when you take from wild, the disease and quality is not controlled, and therefore you have a very inconsistent production. So that leads to low productivity, and that makes the business decision not to go ahead with farming of freshwater prawn, because it's simply not lucrative. So if we go back, how do we involve biotechnology in freshwater prawn? We just want to make male prawns, yeah. So when we produce just male prawns alone, there is no interactive for breeding in the pond. Therefore, the feed they take is developed for the somatic growth of the prawns. So, i.e., that means there is no mating or reproductive energy spent in the pond. So therefore, the prawns can grow bigger. So, and after that, or part of that, we do market assisted selection to choose for traits which can give a better yield or high yield or disease resistant. So therefore, the industry or the supply chain become more reliable, more consistent to produce high quality prawns, and therefore the industry can grow at a scale. So when we do just male prawns alone, so what's the added advantage? So the added advantage is the male prawns are 3 times bigger in size, whereas the females are just, after they carry the eggs, as you can see the screen now, with the buried eggs, they can't grow in size. And in terms of value, the bigger the prawn, the higher the price. So this is vice versa in fish. So when a fish has a market demand of 1.2 kilos, the farmers has to satisfy that 1.2 kilo demand. If the fish has overgrown, as they can't simply sell the fish to the restaurants, because that will not fit within their description. But vice versa in freshwater prawn, the bigger the prawn, the more expensive is the price. And in terms of turnover, the prawns can be grown even faster. That is 4 to 9 months compared to the conventional methodology, which growing male and females. Therefore, when they can grow within 4 months, which is marketable size, and that requires only a single harvest, and this overall increase the yield by 134%. So as I mentioned earlier, we do broodstock domestication, which we always look into selecting the broodstocks without disease. For instance, this is the egg development in the matured broodstock. And this is the laboratory results for all the major disease in the freshwater prawn. So you can see it's all negative, which we always do a quality control over the broodstocks. So where does all this technology leading us to it? So you may have heard about Sabah tea or Sarawak paper or Barrio rice, even Bentong ginger or harum manis. So all this has been GI. So one step higher than GI is what we call Appellation Control. So there's many species in Malaysia. As you all know, that we are one of the 7th biggest mega biodiversity in the world. And we have many species for potential for commercialization in agri-food industry. So basically, how do we get between a usual crop grown in wild to commercialize and become a high value? I think that's where the bridging between agriculture, aquaculture / biotechnology takes a role. Yeah. So just to show a little bit on our successful farmers who have grown our seeds over 4 months period, over 180 days period, they all get a different. So the longer they grow, the bigger the size they are, and it's become more expensive. In the recent pandemic situation, most fish farmers couldn't sell their produce simply because some of them, like this guy, Mr. James, produce high-value fish like Impurao. And simply because the tourists from China is not coming, there is no export demand from overseas, they have to divert to something like freshwater prawn, which have a shorter cycle as well. So even Impurao is, for instance, it would be a next choice for any biotechnology students want to look into, because it's also not been domesticated, the genetics not been looked at widely in selective breeding. So there are many freshwater fish in a desire or in the need for biotechnology intervention in Malaysia to be commercial, so that it can be commercialized. And recently we also looked into the horizon of marine prawns, because the marine prawns suffer a lot of disease lately, and the farmers have switched to growing freshwater prawn in marine environment. And that's proven even in the literature that growing in marine environment, at least at 10 parts per thousand, the shrimps has a better growth. So as I said, we try to disrupt the value chain in different segments. So that's where the earlier when we mentioned genetics, nutrition, and also the growing technology, or including smart farming technology. So next in line, what we are looking at also to include what they call alternative ingredients, if you will, to replace fish meal in the supply chain. So currently we were working on growing some crops like Sesbania, feed it to the black soldier fly, and that finally feed it to the freshwater prawn. So this alone will make our product different from the rest in the market, because people are concerned nowadays what they're eating, and through blockchain they want to see the traceability. And I think this kind of exercise or this kind of intervention will lead to that traceability friendly products. So simply your prawns can be tagged with a chip. When they scan it, they know where the genetics come from, where the feed come from, how sustainably it's grown in farming environments. So this all plays a role for Malaysians or the Malaysian farmers to produce high value products. Yeah. So if I tell you that udang galah, especially in Malaysia, can be a billion ringgit industry simply with integration in paddy, what we call as a project called Ugadi. So this is a rough estimates. Don't get me wrong, but this is just a quote. What the potential industry? Yeah. So taking 100 hectares of land in Kedah alone under Mada area. And they have about 100,000 hectares, converting them 30% to eel, rice, and prawn integration. So this rice and eel is a very symbiotic integration where the prawn takes care of pest and disease for the rice field, and the rice gets nutrient from the prawn waste. So it's a very symbiotic project. So in this case, if we can produce 5 tons per year per hectare, putting a 14 ringgit price tag on a kilo of prawn, is a 6 billion ringgit industry. So you can see from where we are today, where we can develop to, because Malaysia has been gifted with all year round the climates, ample of land, ample of water. What is lacking is technology. So we just started a pilot project to resemble this Ugadi, and this is farm in Tulu Intan now. They're growing the rice. It's already about 35 days now, and it's all looking good. Yeah. So I think with that, I'm finished with my slides, and I really think that the world never lack of funding, but it's lack of ideas. So together we have to bring more innovation. So anyways, the gentleman on your right is Dr. Shem Wen Ling. He was the first Malaysian to actually discover the breeding of freshwater prawn, and that's happened in Batu Maung, Malaysia. And because of that, the FAO has given the name as Malaysian giant river prawn. And I think that's where the history started, and we have to work forward to make the journey become more successful. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Giva. That was a very short and concise insights that you shared with us. We will now carry on with the Q&A session. For dear audience, it's a gentle reminder, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Mr. Giva, you can just drop it down in the comment section. And all right, looks like we have a question here, right here. Okay, let's look at that. It's from Wong Rushan. Hi, Mr. Giva. May I know, is aquaculture considered to be nature friendly and why? So it's a very common question that comes in everyone's mind, I guess, to know whether aquaculture is really eco-friendly or not. Like, is there any impact on environment? Because I'm sure everything has pros and cons, right? So what's your take on that, Mr. Giva?
So environmental concern is yes. So it's you have to think very dynamically. So if we keep on harvesting the prawns from the wild, you are endangering the prawns in the wild. We need to eat anyways. So therefore, we need to produce animals in captive. So when we want to produce animals in captive, the environmental concern is actually what you are feeding the animal with. Like for instance, if you're using fish meal, fish oil based feed ingredients, again the question of sustainability arises. So the thing is, again, you have to bring in more biotechnology intervention in the production cycle so that you can get away from the same old and comes up with something new. So for instance, now people produce cell-based shrimps. So that's moving a real pressure from producing shrimp at large by destructing all the mangrove forests and producing shrimps in the cell in the lab. So to answer your question, that we need to find the answer because we have to move away from the same old to a new era with doing things more in a very dynamic strategies. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Now we have another question from the same person, Brushan. What is the main difficulty that you faced when you started in this field? I'm sure that it wasn't very easy for you to, have your own aquaculture farm in Malaysia. So why don't you share with us what are the difficulties you faced?
Okay, so the first difficulty is to fight or juggle your mind between leaving your full-time job to be an entrepreneur. So that takes a lot of guts to leave your comfort zone, to leave all your high-flying life to just to be a farmer. So that's the biggest challenge. And once while doing that, of course, you need to have money to do work. And once you sorted all the money, the next biggest challenge from growing from a entrepreneurship like what we are now in a small medium enterprise is actually the biggest challenge is the people, right? Or an organization made of people. So the people need to be trained, need to be educated, they need to have a motivation that this company is my future, I'm going to grow my career. So that's the first three basic things, or the biggest challenge, not the biggest challenge any entrepreneurs will face. I think I did face the same thing. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And we have another question also. And this time it's from Roshini Murugesh. What type of nutrients or source do prawn get from the paddy field?
Okay, basically they get the prawns are bottom scavengers, so they can prey on all the insects or worms or whatever zooplankton and phytoplankton is available in the rice field. And also naturally, they when there's a droppings from the paddy seeds itself, it's a very highly nutritious in protein, so they also consume that. So there's a variety of ecosystem or the food chain available for the prawns in the rice field.
All right. Okay, so we have another question from Ayappa. How can the younger generation get themselves into aqua farming? How do you think we can encourage their interest? This is actually quite common among youngsters because nowadays, all youngsters, their perspective on aquaculture or aqua farming is mainly like, oh, it's something dirty or smelly. It's just simply about fishing. There's nothing adventurous in it. So they, they divert their mind into something like a drug discovery or agriculture and all that. So what's your take on this? How do you think we can encourage their interest in aquaculture?
I think that's a critical fundamental issue which we are trying to demonstrate to the youngsters. The farming can be done in a different way without you getting your hands dirty. Of course, getting hands dirty is a good experience, but knowing the millennial kids, they have to work from the mobiles. Probably they even want to control the fish farms just from their desktop in the house. I think those sort of technologies are available in the market now, even in the world. But the question is whether it's an interesting technology or important technology to have. So whether that can fit within Asian mentality or in terms of investment itself, right? We can build a very sophisticated farm to produce a prawn, but whether the business itself will produce profits, because what we call return on investment. So it's not a question of whether there is interesting, whether it's getting hands dirty and getting smelly. That's not the question anymore. Whether you want to do that, whether you have the particular interest. So that's number one. Number two, if you have the interest, what kind of technology interventions you want to bring in or you want to introduce. Again, as I said, when we bring in a technology, there is two aspects. It could be super interesting, but it's not super important, or simply because the farmers will say, hey, this is just waste of time. I know I just can do the thing with my same old method my grandfather taught me. So it's again mentality perception. And with the local encouragement from the government, of course, the government is trying to encourage for us to move on to IoT, smart precision farming. So again, it's all mentality shift. So I think rather than asking the youngsters ask the questions to the people, I think they have to find the answers and drive it the way they want, right? I think that's what is the future, the new era of agriculture, aquaculture.
Okay, thank you. We'll look at the next question. It's from Harishwar Pillai. Based on your experience, does the ornamental aquaculture industry has the potential to shine in the future?
Yes, definitely. If we are talking about, I'm not sure whether this person from Malaysia, whether he's asking whether this is a future in Malaysia. Malaysia used to be the third biggest ornamental producer in the world, right? Ooh. But because of the business enabling factors have not so friendly, the business have shifted so much flown into Singapore. And the Singaporeans now have overtaken Malaysia, and we have fell in number 7 or 8 in the world. So again, it's all something to do with policies and regulatories, which we people in the industry is young generation trying to push policies to the governments so that they become more aware of the situation. So for instance, if you go to Hong Kong, if any fish boarding the flight, they have a priority landing for the animals to land even before the passengers. Because when we shift live animal throughout the world, you have very critical timeline, right? If you have 8 hours, you're fighting and struggling within the 8 hours. But in fact, in Malaysia, used to be like 3 hours before we have to send the fish or shrimps to the airport. Now the process being so much of documentation work have prolonged that process or exercise to 5 hours. So we are not going forward, but we are going backward. So these are the scenarios where we are trying to push policies for the government to really look into, to come up with much less bureaucratic process. Yeah.
All right. Let's look at the other question. How some fish undergo sex changes spontaneously, like clownfish, and what are the reason or factors behind that?
Okay, so sexual changes in fish, I'm not very well versed with clownfish, but in general, some male fish like in grouper, they are male, they are female throughout the early life, and eventually after 20 or 30 kilos of biomass, they become males. So the changes sometimes, some fishes, they are polygamy, some they are hermaphrodites, they have morphed male and female organs within themselves. So the sexual changes, and also is also genetically is inherited, but also the environment also plays a role. So it's more both genetic and phenotype influenced by epigenetics. So So every fish goes through sex changes continuously, but I'm not very sure about clownfish, so I can't comment much. But general, yes, there are a few different types of sexual maturation in fish or shrimps.
Okay, all right. Next question is from Rina. May I know what is meant by marker-assisted selection?
Okay, so it's a genomic tools to do breeding. So for instance, what we are doing now with our freshwater prawn, we are doing the whole genome sequencing. So as you all know, the first human genome sequence done by Sanger sequencing cost $10 billion over a couple of years, right? Now the sequencing technology have got so much cheaper with nanopore, PacBio, the highest range is Illumina. So when we do a genetic marker-assisted selection, that means we select all the traits for freshwater prawns, for instance, from different stocks in the wild, and we pull the genetics into a breeding program, and we sequence the genome, and then after that, we look for the traits, for instance, fast-growing traits, disease-resistant traits, using like single nucleotide polymorphisms. So when the SNPs are predominant in very few different populations, and that's the trait we are looking for, we select that and we produce the better hybrid or more rigorous offsprings. So in short, what we call that is more as a genomic tool to do breeding in a much better or in much more economical way, rather than using the conventional way, which you are reliant on the phenotype differences and you have to wait for a few years to see the changes. But with molecular or biotechnology intervention, things are even done, or you can predict things at a very early stage.
All right. So next question is from Zargam Hussein. Why are integrated multi-trophic aquaculture systems economically sustainable?
Okay, so for something to become economically sustainable, it has to hit some threshold level. So just let me give you an example. 10 years ago, when we used solar systems, or even to afford to use an iPhone, was like something big, right? Now everybody carries, nobody carries the old Nokia phones 3210 anymore. Because why? The technology got cheaper. Why? Because there is a scale of economy there, so the production increases, the cost comes down. So that's, to reach in a sustainability in terms of economics, right? But to reach how IMTA can be economically sustainable, because so in IMTA you have a different level of aquaculture species, from filter feeders all the way to the carnivorous fish, and they are actually like a zero biomass from outside. So the waste water is filtered by these filter feeders, their waste is eaten by another second level of fish, finally goes to the carnivorous species, so that system itself taken care by itself, right? And that's how things are done in the wild. So IMTA is basically mimicking what's in the environment, take it to the agriculture and produce it. So for instance, now we are very monoculture based in terms of agriculture. You've got about 6 million hectares of oil palm, right? And there's 20 feet in between the palm oil, which is empty space. So if you work out the numbers, it's about 1.2 million hectares of space not utilized, and we are importing 60 billion worth of food. So again, so if you can think, what can we plant in between, what can we do in between the crops, let's make it integration. So the same model can be applied in agriculture to make it integrated, to bring the cost down, to increase the productivity and environmentally sustainable.
All right. Next question from Harishwar Pillai. As a fresh graduate, what do you recommend us to do, Mr. Giva? What do you think? Do you think it's a good idea for us to enter this field?
Okay, so fresh graduates, I think in general, you need experience to work, right? I.e., you have to go and work, got scolded, you have to know what you want, you have to decide. So you can't be like coming up from college, yeah, there you go, I want to be another Mark Zuckerberg. So Mark Zuckerberg is only 1 in a billion. Not everybody can be a Mark Zuckerberg. Let's be honest about reality in life, right? So I think as a graduate, I think from my own experience and also looking at the younger ones, I think experience makes you become more mature. So come up from college degree, you work, at least work for someone couple of years, and you strengthen your skills and knowledge, and then you decide whether you want to continue grow a career as somebody employed, or you want to be on your own. So if you're deciding to be on your own, at least you have sufficient knowledge and experience, and people can trust to invest in you, right? Then you can take your life next level. Maybe you have some good ideas to be commercialized in terms of aquaculture, or in general. So I think important is to gain experience, and I think we can't be really picky and very selfish about it. So if you need to work in a restaurant, in a Pizza Hut for a couple of months while getting a proper job, you have to do that. But at least you work in a Pizza Hut, and, it's not so bad. You will learn your Excel, you will learn your spreadsheets, you will learn a P&L. At least that gives you an experience to prepare you for a better job later. So every job has its learning curve. I think it has to take it out rather than just staying idle and waiting for some opportunity to drop on your doorstep.
Okay, noted. Next question. Is there any memorandum of understanding with other agencies from government and private sectors to boost the development of aquacultural field in Malaysia, especially through the application of recent technologies?
So earlier I was talking about interesting and important. So it's always very interesting to have MOUs, policies. I mean, policies not is on the important side, but having MOUs, signing MOUs, and flashing some photos and newspaper and so on, it doesn't serve a purpose if there is no real synergy. So it's more a marriage of convenience rather than an actual collaboration. So so I'm not sure whether this person is asking us whether we have an MOU with other agencies. So if it is towards GK, yes, we have MOUs with agencies, universities, private institutes, and public institutes. So why we need to have that? Because we can't, as a small, medium enterprise, we can't do everything in-house. For instance, if you want to afford an NGS Illumina sequencing machine, that's too expensive. So we have to work with a partner who is reliable, cost-effective. Of course, we can send Illumina sequencing to Illumina, but that's going to cost a lot of money, right? So how do we do that cost-effectively? We have to come up with the projects, proposals, work with research universities to get your research done while it also meets your commercial purpose. I think we can't be selfish in everything we do. In terms of commercialization, we have to give and take in terms of what we can actually disseminate to the public domain and what we need to retain as a commercial in confidence.
Okay. So next question. It's from Zarqam Hussein. How cutting-edge technology and RNA silencing techniques used in aquaculture?
Okay, so I go for the RNA silencing first. So RNA silencing is not cutting-edge technology. It was discovered in 2006, won a Nobel Prize for 2 guys. And that since then, now you have more precision gene editing like CRISPR. Of course, when you go into CRISPR's element, it's more of GMO in agri and aqua. So we have not really gone into that. But of course, CRISPR now widely used in medical fields to edit genetic mutations in genetic disorders. So to answer your question, yes, the RNA silencing technology will help, very much helpful. Like us, we are silencing the gene of the male glands in male prawns, and of course, we can also use the technology to silence disease related or disease related genes. So it has a very wide applications. So what you don't want to be expressed, you can silence that basically by sequencing the reverse of that particular RNA. But the problem in you can't be lucky in everything you do, because a single gene, a single phenotype is controlled by few genes. It's not only one single gene controlling. So probably by switching off this particular gene, you thought you want to stop this characteristic, but something else also got stopped halfway. So that requires a lot of careful studies and trial and error to actually see what actually does what. Yeah, it's quite complex, but I think with current sequencing technology becomes so cheap, it can be done. I mean, the cost is bearable to come up with something innovative. Yeah.
All right. Next question is from Siddharthan. Aquaculture has a huge tendency to become a pollutant industry if not managed well. What do you think can be done to overcome this situation, and how to raise the concern levels as we are at the risk of a devastating climate change?
So, so it's a very philosophical idea whether aquaculture, we can sit down and debate whether aquaculture can pollute the environment or not. The next thing you want to know whether there is a fish or prawn to be eaten on your table. So again, rather than pondering so much how we can go and fix what have been damage been done, I think it's more critical to think how to do things better in the future. So taking the past experience as a learning curve so that we can overcome. So let me just give you an example. So what we are doing in our own supply chain, we doesn't want to use fish meal. So what we want to do, we want to produce insect meals. So when you talk about insect meals, everybody is trying to use some useless biomass to produce some black soldier fly, and you extract the protein and feed it to the prawn. Again, it's an environmental concern because you're moving things around. So it's an energy cost, which is also carbon footprint. So what we are trying to do, we're trying to plant the crops as a parameter crop within the farming ecosystem and harvest the leaf within the farming ecosystem and produce the maggots within the farm. So there is nothing, it's like a zero biomass from outside, and you already have everything you need within a single ecosystem. And it's also traceable. So that's our carbon footprint, climate change. Because climate change, you can argue in many different ways. What we are focused more is the carbon footprint. Because if I use this and this, how much is the carbon footprint we are emitting, right? Because we have done enough damage of emitting so much of CO2 to the environment. So how can we prevent that, right? So that's not only a question to ask to us. Even plowing a soil is not good for the environment because you are disrupting the carbon sequestration. The carbon is emitting so much to the environment. So people are going for trying to get cover crops, the kind of traditional way of doing farming. So that traditional way of farming with biotechnology can solve many issues with much more precision technology. So I think that's my answer to earlier gentlemen, I guess, even though it's a very long answer.
All right. So we have another one. Clara Pang, hi Mr. Giva. I'd like to know, is there any undergoing IMTA project available in Malaysia?
Okay, I have to admit that not that I'm aware of. Maybe there is, but I simply don't know about that. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today, everyone. So thank you very much, Mr. Giva, for sharing your knowledge and insights with us. It was very educational, and it was very enlightening to learn more about aqua farming. All right, so if you have to all the audience, if you have more questions, you can just drop it in the comment section, or if you would like to get in touch with Mr. Giva personally, feel free to get in touch with him at giva@gk-aqua.biz. We will share the email in the comment section as well, so don't worry. And for those who joined late or missed this session, you can watch the edited video on our MYBIOSA YouTube channel after this. We would also like to hear your feedback, so please do fill in the feedback form that we have shared in the comment section. All right, so as for next week, we will be joined by Sure.co all the way from Indonesia to talk about becoming a gift maker for the earth. They will be sharing about biogas and all that, all right? So for more updates regarding this webinar series, like and follow us on our Facebook page, Instagram, and LinkedIn page. Search for Malaysia Biotechnology Students Association or MYBIOSA. Thank you.